What's up, party people? I know this is gonna be a long video. This is my Total Drama All Stars My Way. If you hear me complaining, yesterday I got tripped when I was running outside and my arm really hurts. Both my arms hurt, so if you hear me complaining, that's why. But let's just get right started. This is my way. I made the teams. I feel like these teams are understandable. I think a couple of these, like the only contestants that I think that should not be on the Village Vultures is Lashana. But in season 1 and in season 2, she did a little bit of villainous things, a little bit more than like what other people did. Like in season 2, in the actual game, like in the actual in Total Drama Action, not My Way, like the actual season. She lied to, get that spot A, and so she was kind of villainous, so that's why we have only 18 or 16 cast members. So let's get right into this. So, they showed up to the island. They got dropped down, and they made the teams. And the first challenge was they were fishing for keys. And so what they did was they fell. They jumped off, and then they tried to find a key to open the mansion, and whoever opens the mansion wins. So, yeah. So they have to pick someone to do the stroller, and then pick someone to get people find keys. So it was either up to Bridget, Izzy, or Zoe, because Izzy's really fast, but Zoe's also really fast, and so is Bridget. At the end, they picked Zoe or Izzy because Izzy can use some techniques to get across. So yeah, they picked Izzy. The Villainous Vultures, they picked Alejandro because Alejandro can run really fast. So they picked him. So it's Izzy and Alejandro. The first person that jumped was Bridget, and Bridget got a key, and the first person jumped was Gwen. Both keys did not work, so that's an out. This next person that jumped was Zoe, and the next person that jumped was Lashana. Zoe got a key, Lashana got a key. Zoe did not get it, and neither did Lashana. Now this is where kind of things mix up. Courtney actually cut in line to go with Alejandro, and Harold cut in line as well. So Harold went in, and Harold did not find the key, and neither did Courtney. Okay, so it's Heather and Cameron. In this one, Cameron jumped down and he got kind of hurt, but he's okay. Heather went down. Heather did not get it. Neither did Cameron. Duncan really didn't like Alejandro because of what he did in World Tour, or just how he is. So Duncan really wants to get Alejandro out. So Duncan grabbed a key that he knew didn't fit. Duncan grabbed a key, and Mike grabbed a key. Duncan grabbed a key that he knew wouldn't fit, but Mike's key didn't work, but Duncan's key worked, and Duncan was really angry because Duncan was going to try to turn and everyone to get Alejandro out. So the Villainous Vultures gets the mansion, while the Heroic Hamsters have to go to the island. Now, they don't know who to vote out. Everyone did really good. The only people that didn't jump were Owen and Lindsay, so I feel like that could be kind of a thing. But Owen was scared to jump because, he didn't have his floaties this time. And Lindsay was going to jump next, but she didn't have enough time. Izzy did really good at doing the stroller. But since a lot of people didn't really like what Cameron was kind of doing, because Cameron did really good, whatever it's called, in Revenge of the Island, but so they voted off Cameron because also Cameron was kind of hurt, so he couldn't really do a couple challenges, so that's why he got voted off. By the way, comment down below if you're still in school. I'm still in school until June 6th. I just didn't go take because of the pain in my arms. They both hurt. I landed on both my arms when I got tripped. So, yeah. Okay, so the Villainous Vultures, they have the mansion. Well, the Heroic Hamsters have to sleep in the stupid cabins. Heroic Hamsters team's getting along really well. You know, Zoe's making friends again. Like, I don't know. I'm gonna have to look back on my YouTube video, but I don't think some of these contestants were together, in the video together, for the Revenge of the Island. I don't think these contestants were together. So, Zoe, just like out of anything, Heroic Hamsters has a way better teamship than Villainous Vultures. So the Heroic Hamsters, when they were in the cabin before this challenge started, they were like, we're going to win this, we got this. If we're going to have to vote someone out, it's going to be fairly, so just try your best and challenge. And they were giving each other confidence. But while the Villainous Vultures, they weren't really trying to do anything. The only people that were actually trying to win were Gwen, Lashana, and Courtney. Alejandro and Heather still kind of like didn't really like each other at the time. But also, Joe was fighting with Heather a lot, which might get Joe out, but you don't know that. So, Gwen and Lashana and Courtney make an alliance, just so they don't vote each other out and they can make it to the final, probably 5 or 4. On the Heroic Hamsters, Mike and Zoe made an alliance, and Izzy and Lindsay Mike and Zoe made an alliance, and Bridget and Lindsay made an alliance. And they actually told their team about the alliance, and they were like, okay, we don't really care. You guys don't have to make alliances unless you're going to give it out. So, the Heroic Hamsters alliance split off. So, Lindsay and Bridget aren't in an alliance. Mike and Zoe aren't in an alliance. But Gwen, Lashana, and Courtney are still in an alliance. So, yeah. This next challenge, they were digging for statue. They were digging in a big sandbox. They both had sandboxes, both teams, and they had to make this statue out of brick or out of stone things they dig up. So, in this one, in the original, Lightning had a big part of this story, but he's not in this one, which I actually kind of don't know why he's not in this one. I feel like Lightning should be in this one. But, yeah. Anyways. The Heroic Hamster, or the Villainous Vultures got the help, because they got shovels, because they won. They got the special reward, which was the shovels. But the thing is, there was only 7 shovels. So, Gwen, they had to run to get a shovel. Gwen, Lashana, and Courtney. Well, Lashana got Gwen and Courtney one, so they have it. Alejandro, Heather, and Duncan got one, and so did Scott. Joe never got one, and Joe was really angry at Heather for taking Joe's, because apparently Joe was like, oh yeah, that one has my name on it. So Joe and Heather were just fighting the entire time here, but still, they still had the help, and they started digging. Now, the Heroic Hamsters, Izzy didn't even need shovels. Izzy just started using her forest, skills, started digging. Well, Mike was digging. Everyone in the Heroic Hamsters really knew how to dig that good. They knew how to dig, except for Owen. Owen didn't really know how to dig that much, but when he was digging, he was taking big chunks of sand and looking through them. So, yeah. Eventually, Gwen and Lashana and Courtney. Oh, by the way, there's 7 pieces. Gwen, Lashana, and Courtney. All 3 of them find a piece. Bridget, Izzy, and Lindsay find one. And so both teams have 3 right now. And but the Heroic Hamsters, now the Heroic Hamsters know that there's 7 pieces. They made a team. They had a team talk, and each player had to find a piece. And each player had to find a piece in the Heroic Hamsters to win. So if one player didn't find one and they lose, then I have to vote out that player. So that's what their plan was. The Villainous Vultures, they didn't care who found what. They were just trying to find and win. So Heroic Hamsters, then Harold and Mike found one, and it was just Zoe and Owen. And Owen was doing, and eventually, Izzy, Bridget, and Lindsay helped Zoe while Harold, Mike, and Owen. While Harold, Mike helped Owen, while Izzy, Bridget, and Lindsay helped Zoe. At this point, the villainous vultures only found 4, and then Mike found his, and then everyone started helping Owen, and then eventually Duncan found his. So Heather, Scott, and Joe didn't find one, and then Owen found his piece. So the heroic hamsters, they got the hotel or the mansion or whatever it's called. So they're good. The villainous vultures had to go to the bonfire. This is taking long. It's gonna be a long video. They had to go to the campfire, and they had to vote someone off. Gwen, Lashana, and Courtney really wanted to vote off Heather, but they knew that Heather staying in the game could be good, but also could be bad. But they really, Courtney, Lashana, and Gwen really hated Joe because of like her campaign to get Heather out, because they were like fighting for team leader most of the round. That I forgot to say that about. So Heather, Courtney, Lashana, and Gwen all voted for Joe. Alejandro and Joe voted for Heather. Duncan and Scott voted for Joe. So Joe gets out here. Her stupid campaign to get Heather out did not work. So now this one is the one where you have to shoot leeches. So each team, or since the heroic hamsters won, they got a special reward, and they actually got extra leeches. And if they get hit, like they got more leeches than the other team, and if they hit someone, that counts as 2 points instead of 1. But the bad thing about this one is if they get hit, it counts as 2 points instead of 1, just like how if they hit someone. So this one was kind of like weird, but whatever. Heroic hamsters, they go immediately. They start running to find some helpful things like structures or like rocks to hide under, or like over or behind when they're trying to hit their enemies, when they're trying to hit the other team. Izzy really knew how to like jump around and stuff, so Izzy, Bridget, and Lindsay all stuck together, while Zoe, Harold, and Mike stuck together. But Owen kind of went on his own, so he was really by himself the entire time. Gwen, LaShawn, and Courtney stuck together. Heather and Alejandro during this one, they made just a team, like an alliance, so they won't vote each other off. And Duncan and Scott went together. They were kind of making up. And Duncan was actually telling Scott to like vote Alejandro in the next one because of how he really don't like Alejandro and how Alejandro's so pushy and all this stuff. So, yeah. Eventually, Izzy, Bridget, and Lindsay get hit. And then Owen, since Owen's kind of a big target, Owen gets hit as well. So it's just Mike, Harold, and Zoe. Now, Zoe is kind of jumping. Zoe's a big acrobatic person, so she's jumping around everywhere. Scott gets hit. Duncan, Heather, and Alejandro gets hit. So it's 3 against 3. Eventually, Mike and Harold get hit, so it's just Zoe against 3. Zoe hits Courtney, but then Lashana and Gwen hit Zoe. So, the villainous vultures win, and the heroic hamsters have to send someone home. Now, this one was very hard because the first person that got out was Lindsay, but I feel like they shouldn't send Lindsay home, and they should send someone fairly home. So, at this point, Zoe and Mike's alliance was back, and that was the only alliance in the heroic hamsters team. So, they both voted for Harold, while Lindsay and Bridget and Izzy voted for Mike, and Owen voted for Harold. So that's 3 against Harold, 3 against Mike, and then Harold votes Mike because Harold knew that they were voting for him because they just really Mike and Zoe didn't really like Harold that much, so they knew. So they voted out Mike here, and Mike got really upset because he was like, "Why did y'all vote me out? I didn't even do anything bad." Blah 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 blah. It's gonna be a speed round. This one was the you have to go to Boney Island, and we have to find. Everyone has to find a piece of treasure to win. So both teams have to have 7 pieces of treasure to win this challenge. At this point, Harold hates Zoe and Zoe hates Harold. So Zoe and Owen go together and they start trying to find the items, while Harold and Izzy and Bridget and Lindsay, they all go together and find items. Eventually, the Villainous Vultures didn't have a plan, so they all just went by themselves. Especially the Alliance, they didn't even go together. Duncan, Scott, Alejandro, Heather found one. It was just the Alliance, and they eventually met together, which was Lashana, Courtney, and Gwen. They eventually met together to go find stuff. Harold, Izzy, Bridget, and Lindsay found one. Now it was just Owen and Zoe. And if the heroic hamsters lose again, Lindsay and Bridget and Izzy and Harold were talking. They were like, "We're gonna vote out Zoe, but if we win, then we won't vote anyone out." The Villainous Vultures, Courtney found it, and eventually Gwen found one. It was just Lashana. Zoe found one. It was just Owen and Lashana. Then eventually Lashana found one. So the heroic hamsters go home again. The Villainous Vultures, they go to the mansion, while the heroic hamsters have to send someone home. And of course, Harold, Izzy, Bridget, and Lindsay all voted for Zoe, while Owen and Zoe voted for Bridget. So Zoe gets out there. And now, Chris, there's only 5 more eliminations to merge, but Chris made an idea to add one of the Villainous Vultures to the heroic team, and eventually Lashana got added to the heroic team. The heroic hamsters, they got switched because it would be a fair amount 6-6, because they didn't want to have 5-7. So yeah, everyone welcomes Lashana to their team, and this is very sad for the Villainous Vultures, because now Courtney and Gwen are still in the alliance with Lashana, but it's kind of harder to be in an alliance with Lashana because they're not on the same team. But they said that it could still work. Eventually, Lashana, they all welcome Lashana. I'm saying this right now. The heroic hamsters is there's only one of the Total Drama Revenge of the Alien cast left, and that's Scott. So I don't really care, but whatever. So this one was about them having a cook-off, and each contestant had to make one food for the team to win. And then Chris is gonna have to try it out and show a chef. So Bridget, Izzy, and Harold make a dish, and Lindsay, Owen, and LaShawn make a dish. I'm actually changing this up. You need to have 2 dishes. So 3 people. So then Alejandro, Scott, and Duncan have a dish. They'll make a dish. And then Gwen, Courtney, Heather make a dish. So yeah. It's these 3 make a dish, these 3 make a dish, these 3 make a dish, these 3 make a dish. So Duncan was like, let's make some mango fruitcake. And Alejandro was like, okay, whatever, that's fine. And then Scott was like, no, I want to make my famous chicken breast recipe. So they were fighting, and eventually Alejandro was like, let's do the mango cake since me and Duncan both want to do that. Scott, you can make the mango cake with us. And Scott was like, okay, whatever. So they make a mango cake, while Gwen and Courtney and Heather made a decision to make hamburgers, which is whatever. Lashana, Lindsay, and Owen wanted to make ribs. That's fine, they can do that. While Bridget, Izzy, and Harold were making some log cakes. So each team had a course and then a dessert. While Duncan was cooking, he really messed up the mango recipe. But since Scott was kind of like a stay-at-home kid, he knew how to cook and stuff. He lived on a farm. He had to cook with all these ingredients and all the stuff he grew. So Scott helped Duncan and Alejandro make the dessert, and Courtney and Gwen and Heather, they made their course. So, Chris was like, every team have to, both teams have to make something before I try them. So, eventually, Harold, Bridget, and Izzy make their logs, while Owen, Lindsay, and Lashana make their ribs. Chris ties the villainous vultures first. He says the mango is a He says the mango is a great. He loves the mango and he loves the taste of the mango. So he gives the mango 1 point, or no, he gives the mango 5 points, which is a big stretch because the team with the most points win. He didn't really like the hamburgers. Chris said that the hamburgers are really undercooked. So he ate one bit and then says like it was bad, so gave him 1 point. That was 6 points for the villainous vultures. Now the heroic hamsters. He said the logs were really good. Gave the logs 3 points, and he said that the ribs were the most amazing ribs he's ever tasted in his life. That's 5 points. So that's 8 points for heroic hamsters and only 6 for villainous vultures. So villainous vultures are going to the campfire tonight, while the heroic hamsters are going to the whatever it's called, the mansion. The villainous vultures didn't really know how to vote out since oh my gosh, what is this called? Since Courtney and Gwen were in alliance, they tried to vote. They voted for Alejandro because they knew what Alejandro was doing, and so did Duncan. So Duncan also voted for Alejandro. And at this time, Courtney and Gwen made up, so they're like best friends again. And so Courtney, Gwen, and Duncan voted for Alejandro, while Heather also voted for Alejandro, but Alejandro votes for Heather and Scott votes for Duncan. So at the end, there was 2 marshmallows left. One goes to Heather, and then one goes to Duncan. Alejandro gets voted out here. He's like, what? Why did I get voted out? And then he figured out that Gwen and Courtney were in alliance, and he said something, and he was like, Gwen and Courtney are in alliance. And then, like, before he got flushed. So now the team knows Gwen and Courtney are in alliance, and they're not happy about that. So at this point, before the team swap, they actually made before the next day they made a team swap, and they actually swapped 2 contestants, one from villainous vultures to heroic hamsters, one from heroic hamsters to villainous vultures, because of what someone did in a challenge last round. Harold sabotaged the hamburger and turned the oven down really low, so the hamburgers didn't get cooked. So Harold got put in the villainous vultures, while Courtney got put in the heroic hamsters. So they all welcome each other. The villainous vultures hate Harold. They don't like him. So they're planning to vote him out no matter what. So this challenge was about a no talking challenge, so you cannot talk no whatsoever. If you talk, you're out. Of course, Lindsay doesn't know what the challenge is, so she accidentally talks, and so she immediately loses. Courtney and LaShawn are on the same team now, so that's kind of good. They could be working together to not talk. Of course, Owen, he talks because he wants some food. Harold keeps his mouth shut because Harold knows that no matter what, he's going to get voted out, so he keeps his mouth shut. He kept it shut. Scott eventually talks because Scott and Duncan, they were like kind of talking together. So Scott accidentally whispers and Duncan whispers back, but loses them the point. So it's only 3 on the villainous vultures, while it's 4 on the heroic hamsters. Izzy eventually talks because she accidentally fell down off her bed. Or, she fell and she accidentally said a cuss word, which also was not that good. So she talked. Eventually, Gwen was trying to... At this time, the boys were... They were sitting in the cabins. The boys were in the cabins and the girls were in the mansion. And Courtney accidentally talked to... Or not Courtney. Gwen accidentally talked to Courtney and LaShawn respond. So LaShawn got out there. Usher a point. So it's 2 against 2. It's Harold and... It's Harold and Heather and then Bridget and Courtney. Eventually, Bridget falls asleep, which is fine. And Heather accidentally... Not accidentally, but Heather throws something at her. So she woke up. And she talked. And Courtney saw that. And so Courtney was planning to keep her mouth shut the entire time. Eventually, Heather fell asleep. So Courtney threw something at Heather, and Heather woke up and she talked. So it was just Harold and Courtney left. Now, Harold and Courtney don't like each other. So Courtney falls asleep, and Harold, his villainous vulture kind of mind, he says, he doesn't say anything, but he kind of like points, he touches Heather like on the shoulder, and he like kind of like singles Heather to like hit Courtney. So Heather comes over and hits Courtney. The heroic hamsters lose, and the villainous vultures win. Now at this time, they did not know who to vote out. So eventually, this was really sad for them. But they, the villainous vultures. But then, hold on, they were gonna vote someone out. But then Chris said, "Oh, since the villainous vultures win, they get to decide on who to vote out for the heroic hamsters." Duncan and Scott, they both picked to vote out Courtney. But then Scott's like, no, Courtney's my girlfriend. So Duncan's like, oh, I don't care. Duncan's like, oh, they both picked Owen. Gwen, knowing that Courtney and LaShawn, they were in an alliance, Gwen picks Owen because Owen won. Oh no, he didn't win. Never mind. So they didn't know how to vote. Harold picked Courtney because they don't like each other, and Duncan actually did not like what Scott did not like what Harold did there because Scott and Courtney were dating at the time. So, and then Heather eventually picks Courtney as well. But that was only 2 against Courtney and 3 against Owen. They vote out Owen here. It's 5-5 now. So it was kind of hard. At the beginning of the episode, they got to chill and they didn't do anything until Chef started making all of this food for them, and they were like, and Chef was like, here, eat all this food, there's no challenge. Well, they thought there was no challenge until they ate a whole bunch of food and their stomach started hurting, and then Chris was like, oh, challenge time. So he lied to get them to eat, to like sabotage them. And this one was a running challenge, and if you threw up, you lost. Your team, you don't get a point, and you lost. But if you don't throw up and you make it to the end, then you get a point. Well, if Owen was in this one, he would have gone up immediately because running, and he ate a whole bunch of food. But since, they haven't been, these were good meals too. They were like full course meals. So a lot of the contestants were eating. The only people, LaShawna and Courtney knew that they were going to have a challenge, so they didn't eat, and neither did Gwen. So LaShawna and Courtney got their team a point because they started sprinting and running to the finish line, while Gwen gets her team a point. So, yeah. Izzy kind of breaks the thing to, like, run. She, like, swings everywhere. Swings off trees and, like, through vines and stuff. She eventually makes it to the end, but throws up when she gets to the end, but that's fine. She still made it to the end before she threw up. Scott eventually throws up because he ate a lot of food. So that there's only 1 point for villainous vultures and 3 for heroic hamsters. Now Bridget was kind of starting to get really tired, and so was Lindsay. So they started walking together. Harold eventually made it, and so did Duncan. But eventually Bridget and Lindsay made it, and so the villainous vultures, and then Heather made it as well. But since the villainous vultures only had 4 people make it, and the heroic hamsters had 5, they had to vote someone out, and they voted, Duncan voted, Gwen voted for Scott, Duncan voted for Scott, Harold voted for Duncan, Heather voted for Scott, Scott voted for Harold. So eventually it was actually 2 against Scott, 1 against Harold, and 2 against Heather. Since Scott and Duncan both voted for Heather, and Gwen and Heather both voted for Scott, it was a tie. So they voted again, and actually this time it was a whole row of hamsters that were voting, and Courtney voted for Heather, LaShawna voted for Heather, but Izzy voted for Scott, Bridget voted for Scott, Lindsay voted for Scott. And so Scott got out here And that was really sad because, yeah, it just was. Okay, so there's only a couple more eliminations left. Scott. This is what the elimination order so far is: Cameron, Joe, Mike, Zoe, Alejandro, Owen, Scott. Now this challenge was a challenge that, if you don't, the last person to make it, actually no, that's going to be for a merge challenge. This one was a obstacle course challenge, and this obstacle course was hard. So, if you make it to the end of the obstacle course without, falling, you make a point, but if you fall, you don't make a point. So, everyone starts going through the obstacle course, and eventually Duncan and Harold start becoming friends. And Duncan told Harold to push Heather, and so Heather gets pushed off, and they lose a point. Harold and Duncan eventually made it through. And Courtney saw Duncan say that, and so Courtney told Gwen, and Gwen told Heather. So now Heather really doesn't like Duncan or Harold. So, and since Gwen doesn't like Duncan either, if they lose, they said they would vote Duncan. So, Gwen, Harold, and Duncan were the only ones that made it. Heather didn't make it. Courtney and Lashana made it. And so did Lindsay. Izzy fell. Bridget didn't. There was a time limit, and it was 5. There was 5 seconds left, and Bridget fell. So, it was a tie. And after looking at the footage, you could see that Duncan accidentally didn't touch the plate to win. So that was only 2 that made it for the Villainous Vultures. So the Villainous Vultures they're going to send someone home. And since Gwen told Heather about what Harold did and the plan that Duncan did, Duncan, before in the elimination, was like, well, Harold pushed Heather off, so we should vote Harold. So Duncan votes Harold. Harold votes Duncan, because he knew that he was trying to just play him or trick him. And Heather votes for Duncan. Gwen votes for Duncan. That gets Duncan out. And now there's one more elimination before... Actually, hold on. I'm going to move merge to here. Okay, so now it's merge. So teams have merged. Get rid of these. Now, this team is the alliance of Lashana, Gwen, and Courtney are together now. They're back together again, which is good. And eventually, Lindsay, Bridget made an alliance. And so the only people that weren't in the alliance were Harold, Izzy, and Heather. So, yeah. This is a challenge where there was a bike making competition, and everyone made a bike, and then they had to race to the finish line and the last person to make it to the finish line loses and gets voted off immediately. So, Courtney, Gwen, and Lashana help each other make a bike. So, eventually Courtney makes a good bike. Gwen, Harold, Heather, and Izzy, and then everyone else makes a bike. Harold, Courtney, and Gwen and Heather made it across immediately. LaShawn made it across. Bridget made it across, and Izzy cheated and jumped off her bike and swung to the end. But Lindsay made it to the end with her bike. So, what the challenge was, you had to make it across the finish line with your bike. So, Izzy cheated and she didn't cross with her bike. She jumped off her bike. So, actually, Lindsay would have gotten voted out there. But Izzy did because she cheated and she didn't cross with her bike. Now, there was no challenge today because Chris and Jeff were like, there's no challenge today. This is for real. And, they just, they did whatever they wanted for a day. They, talked. And eventually it was voting time. And they were like, well, there was no challenge. Why are we voting? Because the eliminated cast voted someone out. So, Cameron, Joe, Mike, Cameron, Mike, and Zoe voted for Harold to go home. But Joe, Alejandro, and Scott voted for Heather. Owen voted for Harold. That's 4 against Harold, 3 against Heather. Duncan eventually votes for Harold to go home. And Izzy votes for Heather. That's 4 against Heather, 5 against Harold. But then, there was a twist. Harold found the instability statue, whatever it's called, the safety statue, and so he used it. And Chris was like, oh, wow, that means the person with the second amount of votes from the jury gets to get voted off, and that person was Heather. So Heather goes home there. Heather's really angry about that. Heather's pissed. Well, yeah, I'm going to blur that out because I don't know if I can say that. But she's angry. Heather knows that if it becomes down to a jury vote, she's voting for... She was angry. Anyways... Merge, still merge. There's 6 players left. At this point, this challenge was a challenge that you had to pick 2 team members. It was Bridget, Lindsay together, Courtney and Harold, and Gwen and Lashana. The team members, the first, okay, so there's 3 teams. Courtney and Harold, Gwen, Lashana, Bridget, Lindsay. For an example, if Lashana and Gwen make it last and they don't cross the line first, for an example, Bridget and Lindsay make it across first, they're safe. Gwen and Lashana make it across second, they're safe. But since Courtney and Harold were last, they both get voted off here. So that's kind of what I'm talking about here. So they knew that they were in teams now. So just for this challenge, and it was a kind of like those challenges where you have to do a whole bunch of challenges in like a big challenge. So it was like an obstacle course, an eating challenge, and like a baking challenge, and then like you had to do like a bike challenge and a running. So it was really bad. You already know. The first one was the obstacle course. Everyone made it by. Easy. The eating one was kind of hard for Bridget because Bridget threw up, but they all made it across. Eventually, Bridget and eventually, Lashana and Gwen make it across. And then Courtney and Harold make it across. So, but Bridget tries to touch the finish line, but she didn't. So, Bridget and Lindsay get voted off here. It's kind of sad because they were both doing really good. So, this is the final 4. Gwen, Lashana, Courtney, Harold. So this one was a mouthful. Another 2 people would get voted off here. Actually, no. 1 person gets voted off here. They had to do a painting challenge. Each contestant got 1 painting. And they had to make a new painting. Like with the picture they got, they had to recreate it with stuff in the wilderness. So Lashana gets a painting of Chris. Everyone gets a painting of Chris. They all get the same painting, but they're all using different items. Eventually, Lashana makes her painting first, shows Chris. Chris is fine with it. Harold makes a painting. He's fine. And then eventually, Gwen comes back with a painting first. Gwen comes back, but she lost her painting. But Courtney comes back and also lost her painting. So what Chris did here was Chris was like, okay, since Courtney came back last and she had no painting, usually if Courtney came back here with her painting, Gwen would be out. But since Gwen didn't find a painting, didn't finish her painting, and neither did Courtney, and they lost it, Courtney actually gets out here because she was last. So this is the final 3. This is one last challenge. And then Chris makes the biggest turns of events. They don't have a challenge this time. There's one more challenge, and this is not the last one. Actually, yes, it is. The challenge is first one to make it to the campfire wins. Okay, so Harold makes it first. And then Gwen makes it. Harold's devastated, and this means Lashana goes home here, and it's Harold and Gwen. The cast gets to pick who wins. Cameron votes for Harold. Joe votes for Lashana. Mike, Zoe vote for Lashana. Alejandro, Owen, Scott vote for Harold. That's 4 for Harold. 3 for Lashana. Scott votes for Duncan or Harold. Duncan votes for Lashana. It's 4 for Duncan. 4 for Lashana, 5 for Harold. Izzy votes for Harold. Heather votes for Lashana. That's 6 for Harold, 5 for Lashana. Bridget and Lindsay both vote for Lashana. That's 7. Oh, vote for Gwen. Sorry. Courtney votes for Harold. Lashana votes for Harold. So that means Gwen gets out here second. Harold wins. And this is a tournament event. Harold won here. So this is my total drama. All Stars My Way. Have a nice day. Hope you enjoy. Have fun. Have a good summer. Bye.